gentlemen, welcome to the Scalawags episode 34, the smooth jazz edition, where we play the same music that we play every week, but we call it smooth jazz, because most of us don't know what jazz is.
You know, it's funny because I hear this music now. We've been singing it, and it's been so long since I've heard the real music. I don't know what I was singing, but that wasn't it. It was something
is it actually
sort of
like a real song that like somebody did for a purpose other than us?
I believe so. Josh will know. He's currently making it so that he can talk.
Yeah,
we'll give him a few seconds here. We still don't hear you, Josh. Oh, there we go. I can tell he's going to say something. There we go.
It's all good.
Yeah, there we go.
This is a professional recording here, guys. We do everything by the book.
Yes.
Plan it ahead. It's Kevin MacLeod. So if you're familiar, Kevin MacLeod just has a bunch of freely available music that everyone steals for videos because he put it all out under Creative Commons license.
Is it Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, and is he in fact immortal?
I think, given the prolific amount of music he has written, he has to be immortal.
He has to be, okay, yeah. He cuts people's heads off and steals their life force.
Yeah,
it's gotta be rough,
if you're some weird German guy.
It's got to be rough. Getting invited to parties when you do that, it's not going to happen a lot.
But on the flip side, you've got an infinity of time to do it. So
this is true.
If you only average like one party every century, you're still going to a lot more parties than anybody else ever will.
Imagine the artwork he has. It's just crazy.
Oh, we're off to a great start.
Josh, are you floating in some sort of orange sphere in outer space?
Yes.
I think he's in the goog. I think he's in the belly of the beast. Am I right?
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, you're in the
wink,
you're
wink.
in the belly of the beast.
That's a song that I listen to often. Belly of the Beast.
Right. So, before we get off on a tangent and spend our whole time talking about the things that aren't on our list, maybe we should talk about the things on our list. Of which the first thing, go ahead.
The first thing on our list was actually the theme music requested by Matthew Farwell. So I really hope that you appreciated how hard that was for us to pull off.
I'm thinking we just buy you a boombox and you can hold the boombox on your shoulder and play it, and that'll be good enough.
It would fit the theme of professionalism and polish that we have going on.
There is a term. There's a technical term for that. Did you know that? In the biz, that is called an air bridge. When you connect a music source via actual sound waves through the air, it's known as an air bridge.
Nice.
Instead of a line-in or something like that, yeah, we'll use the air bridge for that.
Or if
that sounds professional.
If you're a film scholar, it's diegetic music instead of mimetic music.
Oh, interesting.
If I recall correctly.
So, speaking of diegetic,
I want to see you make a segue out of that one.
we should talk about how we will no longer have Heather Miller on the podcast because she is changing herself.
She's already changed to a doctor.
She's Frau Doctor.
She is now Frau Doctor. Yes.
No, but she actually has a very good reason for missing this podcast, which we'll hopefully interrogate her the next time.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, she's kind of busy this weekend, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is exciting, but we thought we'd mention that she will be returning to us in slightly altered form. What happens when you get a PhD? Like, what are the stereotypes? We have to check her for all of these.
Well, you immediately go out and buy a Ferrari, right? First of all. Because you got your PhD, and the job offers are going to come rolling in after that, so you might as well go and get the car that you want. That's number one.
With a PhD, aren't you like injected with a curiosity-removing serum, and so then you have to just like do terrible tenure-chasing research that no one cares about for the next 15 years?
I want to see her in like a brown jacket with elbow patches.
Oh yeah,
A
yeah.
tweed.
Oh,
Tweed
it's
jacket.
so
Yes.
good.
I was hoping that she would get a tweed jacket and start
And a,
swimming a bunch, and
But no,
then actually stop
here's
the
a question.
Catholic
Like,
plot.
does anybody know where you can buy tweed jackets? Because we could just get one for her.
oh, nice. I love that idea. I hope she's not
At the
watching
thrift
this.
store.
I bet she doesn't
Why?
watch these when
Why
she's not
do
on them.
you watch the Scalawags in your downtime? I certainly don't.
No,
Like
I don't.
she's not watching.
We should get on topic. Okay. So next on the list is Scala 212 M3.
Yeah.
Really
so
exciting.
big change here is the new REPL, right? The tab completion.
Tell us about it.
I'm
Yeah.
actually more excited about the inlining and the new backend being turned on by default.
Well, that was in M2, but the optimizer and the inliner is progressing. We had hoped to get more done on the Java 8 integration, but there'll be more of that in the next one. Certainly the most fun thing is the REPL stuff, which will also be in 2.11.8. It's super great to play with. After you've tried it for 2 minutes, you'll be asking yourself how you ever lived without this.
Nice.
I think it's more like 30 seconds, really.
Yeah, I actually use Ammonite a little bit these days too to get a bit of extra richness out of the REPL on the REPL thing. So
Ammonite is fantastic as well. So let's. I'm eager to see this REPL war escalate.
yes,
I'm gonna make my my reactive ANSI REPL, and I'm gonna call it Heretic. Just wait, it's coming.
Heretic. There was a game. There used to be a game called Heretic. It was based on the Doom engine. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I played it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's good.
that was pretty good. It was kind of subliminal. Anyway,
Yeah.
that is
So
definitely.
I
a
did
tangent.
actually try to make Heretic, by the way, where you have your REPL up here, and then you have all your types and things show up down here, and they're different spaces. And it works until it crashes. It's pretty good.
That's awesome. I think that's true of any program, though.
No, I just meant ANSI in general is really painful on the Java.
But
Like
any program works until it crashes, right?
Oh, I just meant like when you lose control of the ANSI terminal and you lose track of the state, you lose track of the state. Like you start typing and things show up over here and then there, and it just doesn't make any sense. It's good times.
I think my deadpan was a bit too deadpan there because it's another one of those tautologies. Like the thing is always in the last place that you're looking.
That's true.
Well, of course it is, because once you've found it, you stop looking, so it's always in the last place that you're looking.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway,
It's generally in the last place you think to look as well.
that is also sometimes true, but not always. But it's always in the last place you look.
But
Anyway.
So
well, that's
people
cool,
should
man.
try the new REPL. Everybody.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that's exciting. There was a Gitter room reorg as well this week.
Right. We got tired. So the idea with Gitter is, every repo gets a chat room, and then the chat room is about, in theory, about the development work on that repo. So, but of course, it didn't work out that way with Scala. Every day there'd be half a dozen people coming into the Scala room saying, here's my beginner question about Scala. So the main room, Scala, is now for that. It's the general room, and we made a new room for talking about work on Scala itself, which is called Scala Contributors, which is hopefully both accurate and friendly.
Yep. No, I think that's a good move. It reflects the reality, right? That's the thing. So Scala/Scala, that's where people were going to talk about Scala and ask Scala questions. So you kind of deal with the fact that real life imposes on this wonderful, idyllic, theoretical world that you've got, and you adapt. Exactly. By the way, Daniel is under attack from a black bear right now, so just
Yeah. The joys of living in actually legitimately urban Colorado. There's apparently a bear outside. So if I vanish, kind of out the window with this hairy paw kind of flashing past the screen, you know what happened and you can warn me appropriately.
So speaking of which, this should be the mascot of the Scala user list, is a big friendly bear that just hugs you and pulls you out of your house and takes you into functional programming land.
I think in 10 minutes the bear is going to be curled up on Daniel's lap.
Oh,
the rest
no.
of the podcast.
I don't think my lap is large enough for that.
All right. Well, what's next?
I just saw a tweet come through from Brendan, but I'm trying to find it and can't find it. The tweet vector was one that I didn't consider when I considered all of the various ways that people can grab our attention.
He's
Anyway.
tired of these monkey fighting Scalawags on this Monday to Friday plane.
John
I don't
was
even
on
know
his
what that
way to
means.
watch Heather's
Snakes on a plane,
transformation.
man. Snakes on a plane. And the monkey fighting is how they dub the other MF word sometimes when you're trying to get a PG rating.
Oh, I am too naive to know that.
Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah. The MF word is quite rude. So, and Samuel L. Jackson has a habit of saying it quite often.
Is it like how people say apple juice and whisper it to make it look like you're saying I love you?
Apple juice.
That's got to be some sort of Pennsylvania Dutch thing. Like, clearly Apple has like a double entendre in the Netherlands.
No, because what was it, monkey something, right? It probably
Monkey
looks the
fighting.
same.
Monkey
Yeah.
fighting. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably looks like your lips are moving the same way. Anyway, to get back on topic,
What did you do in elementary school?
We have a topic.
we do, and it's not lip reading, which it should be.
So, Josh, you're just marching down this agenda in the order that I wrote it, which is in no order at all. So feel free to actually.
We assume you
Well, I
are
was thinking-
organized
I was
one,
thinking-
because it's never going to be us.
we should focus on
We
the primary.
promised collections, right?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about sips and slips, and then talk about collections, because I think one has led to the other.
I think the
Yeah.
sips and slips thing we can keep it. I can keep it short. But I think one of the biggest issues that we're facing with this right now is getting the word out that stuff is happening. I keep getting various vectors back to me saying I had no idea this was happening. So yeah, we're trying to get the sip slip. What's the word? The process, the whole environment, the ecosystem back and running again in some kind of really self-sustaining, useful way. We have monthly meetings which are held in Google Hangouts. They are the second Monday of every month now at 4:30 p.m. GMT. So figure that out from the Greenwich Meridian. And we've got Scala/Scala Slip. Oh no, Scala/Slip, sorry, on Gitter, where a lot of the organization takes place. And we're really trying to get this thing going. We have even a couple of expert groups running right now. So, that's basically all I wanted to say is this thing's out there, and we're trying to get the sips and the slips revived and rolling again, so people can see that there's progress and have some say in the future of Scala. The thing is, we got to get the word out there. If you don't hear it, that's our fault. If you hear it and aren't interested, you get the Scala that you get if you're not joining in the process.
Well, we discovered that some people didn't even realize that there was a Scala account on Twitter they could follow. Some people.
Some people, I didn't know this.
Wait,
Scala,
there's a Scala Twitter account?
Scala I follow. Scala Lang.
Who tweets from
On the other
that?
hand.
It's Heather mainly, and me sometimes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So this is how I talk to Heather in the future. She has become Scala.
Yeah. It's Scala_Lang on Twitter.
And actually, something that I'd like to know more generally is how people get their Scala news, because we're trying to hit Twitter, which we've got the GitHub side of things with Scala/Slip. We've got Gitter, and we're cross-posting to Scala/Scala and probably Scala/contributors now, because we have that. But how do you guys do it?
I get it from the echo chamber basically, which generally equates to Twitter. The funny thing is that the sources that I get it from on Twitter are usually faster than the official Scala source. So I don't know, but like the echo chamber is extremely effective. So I guess that means just keep doing what you're doing, generally speaking. Gitter, GitHub, the Twitter, and obviously update the Scala website so that when I'm trying to figure out what the latest milestone is, I can go to one spot and not like search Twitter. But that works out really well. I can tell you that I don't get it from RSS anymore.
No. I think most people don't these days.
I find the Scala Times newsletter very useful. I think it comes out once a week. I'll link to it from the show notes. Scala Times.
Can I get that delivered in paper form?
Sorry?
Can I get that delivered in paper form?
Only if you promise to break my front door down with it. As actually happened to me last weekend with the New York Times.
Scala JP and a few of the guys who tweet around there. You actually have to translate their tweets to English, which reads kind of like a poem that you have to deconstruct in your head. And then the links are generally really, really useful. But I find that they catch things in like Git pull requests and things that are really interesting way quicker than others. But that is basically the Twitter echo chamber.
And just to tag on to the end of this, I have a very short PSA to do, which is that so it turns out Scala has a lot of passionate people in the community. It also has a strong set of resources for development. What it is really lacking in this case is people with the patience and will or inclination to do some effectively fairly mundane project management tasks, which are actually somewhat important to keeping this process moving. And if you want to volunteer, I could really use some help on this, because it ends up being quite a lot of time, especially when you're not getting paid for it. And so we have issues at Scala/Slip. You can jump in on any of these and just help me by following up, doing emails, stuff like that. You don't need to know anything about Scala to do it. You'll actually probably learn a lot about Scala by doing it. So there's some incentive to getting involved here, but there's plenty of kind of procedural work that would really help out.
And you always make it sound so appealing too.
I know. If you'd have told me, I've quit jobs over the idea that somebody was trying to make me a project manager. If you'd have told me I'd be doing this stuff voluntarily, I'd call you crazy. How the hell did this happen? It's basically happened because nobody else is willing to do it. So that's why I'm like trying to lay the guilt trip on people. Come and help me, please.
You can see the four of us are totally willing to help you.
Oh, you guys help.
We're here for
actually,
you,
Seth does. Totally. Seth's like...
Seth actually...
my rock.
I don't know if you guys realize this, but if you remember the days when the podcast would come out at once every 3 months, and then Seth joined, and then we were regular because...
He's like a really good laxative for us.
He's the Metamucil.
I'm track.
Scalawags regular, yeah, very good.
Metamucil in our podcast. That's what he is.
Anyway, yeah. So everybody should kick in. I feel guilty, actually. That's why I make the statement. Anyway.
No, don't feel guilty, Josh. I've got some plans for you that I need to discuss with you offline.
Okay.
But it comes down to the by name stuff. It became clear this week that I really can't do this job of trying to get the process, self-sustaining, and be involved technically in any way. There's too much of a conflict of interest and too much in proprietary. But I'm really interested in the by name stuff, so I need to talk to you about that because I need to show you some of the examples of the by name stuff that I've seen, and then I'll just concentrate on this. And after a few months, if people get trust in the system and stuff, then maybe I can join in and do the fun stuff again. But I think for now, this has to be the way it is. So
yeah. We have a quick question actually, which is relevant. Oh. This is from Helena, who already told us that she has a tweet jacket. Which thank you, Helena. We will. We might send that to Heather.
Tweet jacket.
But she also asks, can't we choose CodeGen project management? There was an SPC plugin released for that.
Oh, I dearly love that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not hard, this stuff. It just takes time, and it doesn't take a ton of time. Like if you pick up an issue, and that issue, the comment on the end of it is like, can somebody please email the expert group and find out what the latest is before the next meeting, and just post it up here. That's, what's that? It's a little bit of effort, but enough of them really becomes a time sink. So if we can get enough people to sort of volunteer and do some of this, that would be great. Oh, it would be so good.
So related, there has been a lot of activity on slips, which is really good to see. Working groups. I threw a proposal together on Scala Views, which we talked about last time, that basically Martin had a few comments on it, feedback, and in all frankness, my proposal is basically like, views are kind of bad how they are. Let's take how they are and make it work the way it should, and outlaw the class of things that were really terrible. And then we can, deprecate the part you shouldn't use, and you have something which you can use that's similar enough and fast enough that you won't kill yourself. But Martin wants to go far more aggressive and threw together let's rewrite all of the collections.
Well, so I'm all in favor of rewriting all the collections. I really actually am.
Yeah,
however,
me too.
that seems a lot more exciting on its face than it actually turns out being once you kind of look at the list of restrictions here.
Yeah.
And this, maybe we can loop back to this if we want, or we can just dive straight headfirst into the controversy, because I'm really not a fan of what's happening there.
I think we need to dive in and explain some of these restrictions right now. So do you have that list handy?
No, but I can get it handy.
I did have it handy, and then I accidentally closed the tab while we were talking because I was tweeting to John Purdy. I'm sorry, guys, I fail.
I'm
looking it up. I'm looking it up too. I was unprepared.
It's
issue
prepared. It's issue 818, but
yeah.
But where? It's in the Dottie repo, right?
I've got them. If you want me to read them out, I've got them right here. So
okay, go ahead.
Okay, number 1, normal usage of the collection should stay the same. That is, the standard operations on collections should still be available under the same names. Some more exotic and advanced scenarios, such as breakout, can be dropped if alternative ways to achieve the same functionality exist. Mm-hmm. Number 2, user-defined implementations of collections should port to the new library as far as is reasonable. We should allow some breakage here, if it's necessary to achieve other goals. Number 3, we should strive for simplicity in APIs and implementations. Number 4, we should strive to better separate interfaces from implementation and avoid the fragile base class problem where too much gets inherited automatically. Now, number 5, we should try and simplify the inheritance graphs, which is sort of related to number 4, in particular those often used collections such as lists. It is true, list is one of the ones that we pull out when we show the trait linearization during our training. It always gets a laugh when you show the trait linearization for list. Number 6, we should improve the integration of strict and lazy collections by means of better architecture for views. Views should avoid accidental forcing and should omit transformations from collections that require such forcing. However, forcing is still needed to support aggregations. Number 7, try to integrate Java 8 streams and or have our own high-performance implementations for parallel collections. Number 8 should be at least on a par with the current collections in what concerns efficiency. In what concerns efficiency? Okay. In particular, we should allow specializations of collection operations for particular implementations. These optimizations should still work if the static collection type is abstract, e.g. an optimized implementation of ++ on array buffers should be called even if the static types of the operands of ++ are iterables. And number 9, the design should be friendly to optimizations such as inlining and possibly more advanced whole program optimizations. Okay. That is the list.
So really the restrictions are 1 and 2. And 2
no, 8 is big too. 8's really big.
Yeah,
be at least as efficient.
Not hard.
We should actually say which one is which. So 8 is the restriction that optimizations ignore the static type and happen based on the dynamic type. I would argue that's quite a hefty restriction on some things you can do. There's a whole class of design that's thrown away because of that. That's based purely on static types.
So yeah, so 1, 2, and 8 are the restrictions. 8 is not a particularly onerous restriction because especially in normal usage patterns from non-experts in the library, Scala's collections don't have particularly outstanding performance. It's good. It's sort of middle of the road, but it's not phenomenal. It's relatively easy to beat. So I don't think that 8 is going to be a concern for any serious reimplementation of the collections library. 1 and 2,
Okay.
though, actually mean something really, really, really constraining. And that's kind of where my objection is, right? Because I think that the collections library as it stands right now, and I've had this conversation with a lot of different Scala developers in various contexts. Most recently, I had it with Victor Klang at Scala World, but we were talking about how the collections library as it stands is basically optimized for a series of use cases no one has. So use case number 1 that it's optimized for is kind of carrying around these generic list restrictive interfaces like iterable, traversable, seek, etc., that are generally not as useful as you would think, and then trying to make them behave in sort of a fully semantically correct way. For some definition of correct. People don't really do that, and when they do that, it's generally a mistake. They're generally doing it by accident. Generally, you want the more specific collection type because you need to know what the efficiency is of your underlying abstraction if you're going to be doing any sort of serious manipulation of it at all. The second problem is that I have never, ever taken a bit set and mapped the ints to a string. Like it's not, and then wanted it to automatically converse to a set. Like I've never, ever, ever done that. The only time I've come even close to that is like tricks with breakout for efficiency reasons when I'm mapping like a vector to a bunch of tuples and I want to turn that into a map, right?
I bet there's one
time
more.
I've done something like that.
I bet there's one more that I can think of where that happens though is if you ever use a range. A range is very limited to an arithmetic progression. As soon as you start doing something over that, you need a different type. I think it defaults to vector by default. So there are some occasions for that to happen.
Yeah, I would argue it's basically map and range.
I mean,
that are the big ones.
Yeah, when you have a range, you have a arithmetic progression. A simple one is like 1 to 20. A more complex one is 1 to 21 by 3. Or something like that. Yeah. As soon as you do any kind of map operation on it, it doesn't matter whether it could theoretically still be a arithmetic progression afterwards. It immediutely jumps to a seek. I think it's vector.
Yeah, it'll go to an index seek. So which is a vector under the covers. See also generic supertype problem annoyance thing. I agree that range in the current design is a valid use case of this, and I had forgotten about that. But I would argue that the solution to it is not to make the map operation sort of into something that map isn't, which is what the current collections library does. Rather, I would want to make range something more powerful.
I knew you were going to say that, and actually, as I was kind of running through that, I'm like, yeah, what about just making range stick out there on its own? I mean, it is kind of a different thing anyway, right?
I mean, and so like I use ranges with Scala Z stream of exactly that form that you describe, and I map over them all the time, and I don't even think about it because range is nothing special in Scala Z stream. It's just another stream, right? So if you have some sort of first-class lazy collection, which Martin is already sort of hinting at when talking about integrating with Java 8 streams in some fashion, you don't need a magical range type, which is just a numerical progression. You can just talk about lazy collections.
So Daniel, my question for you is, suppose views were amazingly great and were implemented really well and had all the performance characteristics you want. Would you be satisfied with an API where you, like the Java 8 API, where you always began your operation by jumping out of collection land and into view land or stream land? Write down all the operations you want, and then say what collection you want at the end. Like, would that? Because it may be that this proposal will actually give you what you want. You can just not use the old API and do everything through views or streams.
I mean, I would be very happy with that sort of API, but it doesn't actually meet all of my needs. especially when it starts coming down to performance and things like that. Like I need to be able to work with the raw collection in an eager fashion. That's an important feature for me. And being able to work with the raw collection in an eager fashion with implementations that I know are precisely optimized to vector or to list or to hash set, and not have to worry about, well, this is actually magically inherited from gen traversable ones. Things like that.
Isn't that covered by requirement 8?
It is, but so here's the problem, and it's also sort of touched on by the fragile superclass restriction, I guess 4, requirement 4. But the problem is that I think we've got a little bit of a conflict here, because if Martin actually wants to cover the whole conceivable range of ways that people can use the current collections library, then we're going to loop right back into fragile base class problems, efficiency problems, inheritance problems. Like all of those things are going to come back to us. The current collections library is a trade-off between kind of those extremes. And if he wants to keep all of the existing use cases effectively source compatible, aside from really esoteric things, then it's going to land in the same trade-off. And that's my objection to these restrictions.
So let me play devil's advocate on a people level for a second here. Not that I'm saying this is what's happened, and not that I'm trying to put words in anybody's mouth, but one of the things that occurs to me is this processes like these. Believe me, I'm way more into the process side of things than I ever thought I would be or ever wanted to be. But processes like these, they evolve over time, and you start out with a particular goal, but those goals soften sometimes in the face of hard evidence. I suspect that as things developed, if you said, you know what, it would be much easier if we just made this one small change or this one small exception. The fallout is minimal. There will be some source level fallout, but it's minimal. Can we still make this change? Look at the cost benefit of it. Look at the advantage we would get. That would be a discussion that you could have at the time. So maybe these are good goals without necessarily being hard concrete restrictions over the course of a redesign like this. Does that make sense?
If that is in fact the case, and if that's how Martin sees it, then I'm much softened in my kind of annoyance with this whole thing. I
should say I have absolutely no idea or insight if that is what Martin means. I don't want to speak for him. But.
Did you guys look at Martin's strawman though?
We're going to have like a second episode after we've all actually read and studied this, right?
Yeah.
Because I certainly haven't.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long list of stuff down there.
It looks like what he wants to do is very similar to what I think we all want to do, which is you have a ops trait which defines collection operations based on some aspect of like, can this collection be viewed as a like iterator, right? And then it looks like he's trying to control which ops gets annotated on a collection. So now,
I mean, to me, it looks a lot like what everyone has been asking for a long time. Yeah. And so it sort of puzzles me, some of the negativity around it, actually. It seems like, I mean, the major characteristics are the interface and implementation are much better separated, which means that a type like seek suddenly has far less baggage on it than it used to, which is what people in type level and elsewhere have been asking for, so that the types referred to in the spec don't bring as much implementation along with them.
The other thing which Martin does, which I think is clever if you're going to focus on the kind of collections that are already in the collections library, is it's based on iterable. So the fundamental thing here appears to be can iterate, which is for a given thing, can I get an iterator bay on it? And then from that, you can build out views, you can build out the current collection operations like fold left, fold right, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Interesting, because fold right is actually on the iterator itself.
Interesting. So what does
Yeah.
that? Yeah, what does that imply? That it's either that it's bidirectional or that you reverse it first and then iterate.
Yeah, it's
Something like that.
extra. It's extra memory
That's
basically.
extra overhead for the iterator itself. Yeah. Interesting. Um, anyway, like it's a straw man proposal, so it's something we can still fight on. But it's interesting that like right now the collections are based on the notion of traversable, but not the same like Haskell sense of traversable. It's a traversable of you give it a affecting function, and then you can run that on every element in the collection. And that's the fundamental piece of our collections library.
Right.
And then on top of that
Trait.
is iterator. What?
I was just going to say, yeah, it's like a trait with one method, which is for each.
Yes. Yeah, but it's not like the traversable from Haskell or whatever, which is different, which is like all monadic and or sorry, applicative and fun. It's very side affecting and very limiting in terms of the kinds of optimizations you can build on it. But Martin's talking about basically moving the abstraction layer up, making everything be iterable. So this would actually break Scala ARM because I try to have the notion of a managed traversable where you can control and make sure iteration happens in the scope of a resource acquisition block, those sorts of things. So that class of solution will be gone, but nobody ever really used that except for me, I think. So I don't think anyone else will be sad. But basing things on iterators, I remember Paul was trying to do this as well. It's it could give us a lot of flexibility if the implicits that he has there actually work out to do the right thing in terms of returning collections. Could be. I mean, this could really be interesting. You push your optimizations though into your iterator. That's what I'm not sure of. We have to look at it more in depth. It's a good straw man basing things on iterator because I was actually thinking of trying to base things on still trying to base things on the notion of a fold. The way that my proposal does with transducers and views. I still like basing things on fold a little bit better, but you run into problems with things like zip.
Yeah, well, so my view of it is that it's okay to kind of share implementations via type classes or otherwise, based on some kind of central notion, either iterators or folds, for things that are reductions. So if you're taking the length of something, if you're taking the sum, if you have some sort of numeric type class floating around, if you're, I mean, you can implement group by like this. There's a lot of different things you can do in this. The key thing being that you're taking, a collection of things and reducing it down to a single thing. I don't think that trying to take a collection of things and turn it into, another collection of things is something that you want to abstract over. So zip is a good example of this, and I think that trying to abstract over that is part of what led to a lot of the problems with the current collections library.
But doesn't every collections library that you've seen from like modern languages abstract over that with builders?
Well, you can abstract over it in kind of a sense where, okay, we can get zip from applicative or we can get map from functor, that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
you abstract over the signature, but you don't abstract over the implementation. So in other words, whether you base on fold or iterator doesn't actually matter in a non-efficiency sense, because you're not trying to implement something like zip in terms of fold. When you implement zip, you implement it in terms of, well, I've got a cons cell and a head and a tail, or I've got a list, vector, or I've got a vector trie that I'm, traversing over arrays and things to find stuff. So you actually have the raw implementations. This implementation sharing thing is a large part of the problem with the current collections library.
Again, playing. I don't necessarily inhabit this position, but I'm playing devil's advocate a bit. One of the reasons for doing that is to reduce the amount of duplicated code, right? I mean, there are collections that are sufficiently similar that two implementations of the same method will be virtually the same code if you were to implement them. And now you've doubled the maintenance overhead for dealing with fold or zip or whatever it is. So I can see the kind of aim. What this reminds me of, if I was to sort of pull something out of the memory of many years of software development, is the checked exceptions experiment in Java. Ultimately, that was a failed experiment, but it was something that was, tried and worth a go. And it's not like it was a total disaster.
I'm not saying that the collections library in the current Scala was a bad thing to do from the very beginning. I think we learned some really interesting things from it, and it was totally worthwhile. But I think that one of the lessons that we need to take away from it is where the line is on shared implementations. So, for example, we keep coming back to zip, and I think zip is a fantastic example of this. Think about implementing zip on list and on vector, right? Now, they're both immutable collections. They're both immutable seeks. They both have relatively fast prepend operations, etc. So you could implement it in terms of kind of a right fold and just sort of prepend up your collection and you're done, right? And that would be a generic implementation that you can share between both of them. Or you can do it with an iterator, like so you could do that, right? But if you have one implementation that's in terms of list that deconstructs both lists recursively, kind of in a line, and then you have another implementation in terms of vector that pre-allocates the target bitmap vector to the appropriate size and then mutably hits all the cells and then returns that as a chunk. You are going to be an order of magnitude more efficient on the vector and several constant factors better on the list. So both sides win out. And in the end, your code is not really duplicated because you have this very tailored implementation. I would argue that if you have two collections where these fundamental functions like zip and map and things like that, flat map, are really that similar, as in you literally just copy pasted and search replace the names, then why do you have two different collections here? What is the purpose then?
I think the only, again, lobbing in the devil's advocate bit, is that may be true for certain implementations of a method, but not all methods.
I'd also argue in today's world, it's not necessarily whether or not zip's efficient, it's whether or not your staged operations, can I fuse them all together and have efficient operation on the whole chain of them?
Yeah.
So zip might be more efficient in that fashion, but what do I have to do before the zip? What do I have to do after the zip? Can I get it all to fuse and be efficient?
I think it's interesting to note that one of the things that, and my knowledge of C# and .NET in general is pretty minimal, but I know that one of their tools for dealing with this is delegate methods, and the idea that if you have got a general method that will work for your collection, you could simply delegate to the general version, but then use more custom ones for other ones where it makes sense. I don't know why I threw that in there because we don't have that, but
I think we could mimic it basically.
Yeah.
I've seen some proposals in the past where people were using basically using implicit priority scoping to figure out what to pull in.
Yeah.
And I think Martin has basically outlawed that class of solution with Rule 8. That's why I said it was limiting. Like, that class of solution is gone because that's 100% based on the static type and not the dynamic type. Right? Because you need the dynamic type. But you could mimic it if you have a closed world assumptions on dynamic types and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the point is, I hope those of you listening, this is your mental juices are flowing and you're excited and you have ideas and you want to write them down, send them to us, send them to Martin, comment on the PR, and add things. Because I think at this point we need a lot of good ideas, because we do have a bunch of real world restrictions of you can't add something into Scala that's going to break everybody's code base. And the collections library is everybody's code base at this point. There is no code base I know of that doesn't touch at least a collection.
Yeah, I'd like, in addition to people having ideas, also code. I mean, I think one of the best things about this call for proposals that Martin put out is that it's possible to not just write comments on it in English, but actually code it up in a fairly small amount of code. Martin's own proposal is 404 lines.
That's true. I'm going to throw out I'm going to throw out just a couple of other factors because I know we're limited on time because Daniel's we're about to lose Daniel.
He's turning into a bear.
The one thing I wanted to say, because passions get high during stuff like this, is that as far as I know, nobody who's involved in this conversation wants to like shoot Scala in the head or anything like that. So when you're arguing your position, try and remember that everyone who's involved in that conversation probably has what they consider to be Scala's best interests at heart, and please act accordingly and try and keep a respectful, argue your position by all means. Let's not get angry or upset about it. The other two things I wanted to say.
Can I add one thing to that? Is that
oh yeah, sure.
You don't win arguments by berating other people. You may in the short term, but you will lose in the long run.
Actually, I think was it Voltaire said that? Basically, I think it was insults are the last refuge of the incompetent. I've always liked that quote. That's a great one to throw out there. Two more things that I wanted to sort of get on, just kind of out there in the world is going back to the range thing, because we sort of hit on that. Range is an arithmetic progression. It is effectively a whole different kind of collection. And one of the things that really impressed me when Paul Phillips was working on PSP was that he really thought about not just range, but there are other mathematically defined things like sets, for example, that can be defined not by their contents, but by their constraints. So an example is all doubles between minus 200.0 and plus 200.0 is a set. Mathematically, that's a set. It's very hard to do with doubles because of the way that they would be contained. But the thing is, that is an actual arithmetic set. So this is also something that would be nice to kind of see considered in the collections. And then the other one that is sort of a meta level out again is something that I've just noticed in the Scala community in general, is this sort of in some ways grew out of Josh's proposal of revisiting views, and there is this tendency in the Scala world to say, we could do that, but if we did this other thing that's like 10 times the size, it would be even better. And one of my constant arguments is, that's great, we should do the big thing. Let's not lose sight of doing the small thing that might have a chance of getting some benefit now, and also do the big thing later. So in other words, it's too common in the Scala world to say, okay, let's go for the world, let's shoot for the moon, and then it doesn't work, and we never get the improvement that we sort of started out for in the first place. So that was my comments on it. I know we're running out of time, but
cool. I didn't see any more questions, so with that, just want to say thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. We actually stay on time now that I have to go home and pick up the kids at a hard deadline. So
I don't know. I thought Daniel wanted to say something else.
No, I'm fine. I was just going to mention really quickly for people who are Googling along at home that the set of all doubles thing between x and y, defining sets in that way is intentional sets as opposed to extensional sets, which is what we traditionally work with. And there are a whole plethora of pluses and minuses. If you want more information on that, Jed Wesley Smith has a fantastic talk that he gave, I think for the Sydney Scala user group. Just absolutely relentlessly fantastic talk. Should be at every conference ever. That explains the pluses and minuses, where we might use them, and why we don't do them very often.
Okay, interesting.
All right, guys. With that, have a great day.